Why aren't you living on the ranch your husband left you before he passed? My brother James' voice boomed in the small apartment like thunder. He had just walked in, and his eyes were scanning the stained walls, the leaking ceiling, the old furniture I had managed to get from second-hand shops. Everything was cramped, small, and depressing. I was sitting on the worn sofa, my hands in my lap, my back straight, just as I had always been taught. I looked at him without answering right away. I knew my silence would say more than any words. James stood frozen in the middle of the living room, perplexed, confused, hurt. "Elvira," he repeated, "why are you here, in this place, when you have a big house, a ranch with land, with animals? What happened?" I opened my mouth to respond, but I didn't have time. Behind James, Richard appeared in the doorway. My son. My only son. He walked in with his hands in his pockets, his head held high. That annoyed expression I had learned to recognize so well in recent years. He didn't even look at me. He just stood by the entrance, as if he were just passing through. James turned toward him, waiting for an answer, waiting for his nephew to say something that made sense. And then Richard spoke, with that cold voice that chilled my soul every time I heard it. "I gave that old ranch to my father-in-law to take care of the animals and build his dream home," he said, looking at James with indifference. "My useless mother doesn't deserve it." The silence that followed was deafening. I stopped breathing for a moment. The words fell on me like stones. Useless, doesn't deserve it. My mother. James was paralyzed. For several seconds he said nothing. He just looked at Richard as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard, as if the words needed time to reach his brain and be processed. Then I saw his shoulders tense, his jaw clench, his hands slowly close into fists. He snapped his fingers. It was a dry sound, cutting. And in that moment, I knew something had changed, that something was about to explode. "Repeat that," James said in a low voice, dangerously low. Richard raised his chin arrogantly. "What you heard. I gave the ranch to Charles, my father-in-law. He needed it. He'll actually do something useful with it. Mum wouldn't do anything but let it go to ruin." James took a step toward him, then another. He stood in front of Richard, his eyes burning with fury. "Do you know what I just heard?" James asked. "I just heard a son call his own mother useless, the woman who gave birth to him, who raised him, who sacrificed everything for him." "Don't start with the drama," Richard said. "I know what's best for her, and that ranch is too much for her to handle alone." "Too much for her?" James raised his voice. "That woman worked that land for 30 years alongside your father. She planted every tree. She raised every animal. She built that house with her own hands. And you say it's too much for her?" Richard shrugged. "She's not that age anymore. She doesn't have the strength. It's better this way." "Better for who?" James asked. "For her? Or for your father-in-law? Or for your wife who probably convinced you to do this monstrous thing?" "Teresa has nothing to do with this," Richard said, grinding his teeth. "Teresa has everything to do with this," James retorted. "Ever since you married that woman, you started to change. You stopped visiting your mother. You stopped calling her. And now you have her living in this hole, paying rent, while you give away her inheritance as if it were yours." I remained seated, motionless. The tears wanted to come out, but I held them back. I had cried so much in the last few months that I had no more tears left. Or maybe I did, but I had learned to keep them inside, not to show them. Richard moved closer to James. "She's my mother. I decide what's best for her." "No," James said firmly. "You don't decide a damn thing. Because that ranch wasn't yours to give away. And what you did has a name. It's called dispossession. It's called abuse. Richard let out a nervous laugh. Abuse? Everything is legal, James. She signed the papers. There are documents. There are witnesses. James stared at him, and then he smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was cold, calculated. Do you know who I am, Richard? James asked. Richard looked at him, annoyed. An intrusive brother who lives in the United States and thinks he can come here to lecture us. I'm a lawyer, James said, letting the words fall like a hammer. A lawyer specializing in family law and inheritance. And believe me when I tell you that I know exactly what to do with cases like this. I saw Richard's face change. The color drained away. The arrogance vanished for a second. Just 1 second. That doesn't change anything, he said, trying to sound confident. The papers are signed. Everything is legal. Legal doesn't mean fair, James said. And signed under pressure doesn't mean valid. But a judge will determine that, not you. He moved closer until he was inches from Richard. I'm going to give you a piece of advice, he said in a low but clear voice. Call your father-in-law. Tell him to enjoy that ranch, because he's going to have to give it back. And when that happens, you're going to have to look your mother in the eye and beg for forgiveness on your knees. Richard backed away. You're crazy if you think you'll achieve anything. We'll see about that, James said. Richard opened the door abruptly. Do whatever you want. I don't care. And he left. The slam of the door echoed in the apartment like a gunshot. Silence returned, dense, heavy. James stood in the middle of the room, breathing deeply, trying to calm down. Then he turned toward me. He walked slowly and sat down beside me on the sofa. He took my hands in his. They were warm, firm. I couldn't remember the last time someone had touched me with affection. Elvira, he said, looking me in the eyes. This is not going to stand. I swear it to you on everything sacred. I won't let them treat you this way. A tear rolled down my cheek. Just one. I couldn't hold it back anymore. James, I said, my voice trembling. I signed the papers. He's right. Everything is legal. Why did you sign them? He asked gently. I closed my eyes. The memories came like a torrent. Because they pressured me, I whispered. Teresa came with Richard. They told me it was for the best, that I couldn't take care of the ranch alone anymore, that Charles needed it for his retirement, that I would be better off in the city near the hospitals. And you believed them? James asked. No, I said, opening my eyes. But I was tired, so tired. And they insisted so much, and I just wanted them to leave me alone. James squeezed my hands. Where are the documents? The ranch papers, your husband's will, the property titles. I have them, I said, in a metal box, underneath my bed. I saved everything, even the ones I signed that day. Good, James said, nodding. Very good. Now listen to me carefully. Tomorrow, you and I are going to my office. I'm going to review every document, every signature, every date, and we're going to see how legal all of this really is. What if nothing can be done? I asked, fearful. James looked at me with determination. Something can always be done, Elvira. Always. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? I looked at him. My younger brother, the one who had gone to study in another country, the one who had built his life far away, but who was here now, in front of me, ready to fight. Yes, I said. I trust you. James stood up. Get the box. We're going to review everything tonight. I got up from the sofa with difficulty. My knees ached, my back too. I walked to the small bedroom. I knelt by the bed and pulled the metal box out from under the mattress. It was heavy. It was full of papers, documents, memories of a life that no longer existed. I returned to the living room and placed the box on the plastic table. James opened it carefully. He took out the papers one by one. He spread them out on the table. He read them in silence. I watched him, his furrowed brow, his eyes moving quickly over the letters, his mouth pressed into a thin line. After several minutes, he looked up. "Elvira," he said, "this is wrong, very wrong." "What did you find?" I asked. "I found irregularities," he said. "Many. The property transfer was done without an official appraisal, without impartial witnesses, and most importantly, your husband's will clearly specified that the ranch was for you, with lifelong usufruct." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Richard couldn't transfer the property without your actual consent," James explained. "And even though you signed, there are indications that it was under coercion. That invalidates the document." I felt something move inside my chest, something that had been asleep for a long time. Hope. "So it can be recovered?" I asked, almost not daring to believe it. James looked at me and smiled. This time it was a genuine smile. "It can," he said. "And it will be recovered. I promise you." I sat back down on the sofa, my hands in my lap. But this time they weren't trembling. This time they were still, firm, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake staring at the stained ceiling of the apartment, listening to the street noises, the cars passing by, the distant voices, the constant sound of the old refrigerator that never stopped making noise. James had stayed in a nearby hotel. Before leaving, he had hugged me, hard, like when we were children, and he protected me from storms. He had promised me that this wouldn't end this way, that he would find a way to fix everything. But I couldn't stop thinking about how I had ended up here, in this place, in this life that I didn't recognize as mine. I closed my eyes, and the memories came as they always did, at night, in the silence, when there was nothing else to distract me from them. I remembered the ranch. The first time I saw it, I was 25 years old. I was young, full of dreams. I had just married Albert. He was 28. He was a construction worker, hard-working, with big, rough hands that touched me with a tenderness that made me feel safe. We had saved for 3 years to make the down payment on that property. It was small then, only 2 acres of dry land, a small wooden house with a sheet metal roof, no electricity, no running water. But it was ours. I remember Albert carried me in his arms to cross the doorway on the first day. We both laughed. I was wearing a floral dress my mother had sewn for me. He smelled of dirt and sweat, of honest work. "We're going to build something big here, Elvira," he told me, looking me in the eyes. "We're going to raise our children here. We're going to grow old together here." And I believed him. For the first few years, we worked like animals. Albert got construction jobs in the town. He left before dawn. He came back when it was already night. His hands were destroyed. His back ached. But he always had a smile for me. I stayed on the ranch. I cleaned, cooked, planted what I could. I learned to raise chickens. Then we bought 2 pigs, then a cow. The land was hard, rocky, but little by little it began to bear fruit. When I got pregnant with Richard, Albert cried with happiness. He hugged me so hard I thought he would break me. That night we sat outside the little house, under the stars, and planned everything we would do when the child was born. "We're going to give him everything," Albert said. "Education, opportunities, everything we didn't have." Richard was born in the town hospital. It was a difficult birth, long, painful. But when I held him in my arms for the first time, all the pain disappeared. He was perfect, small, with his eyes closed and his little hands clenched into fists. I looked at him and knew I would do anything for him, anything at all. We returned to the ranch 3 days later. Albert had built a wooden crib with his own hands. He had sanded it until it was smooth as silk. He had painted it white. He had carved Richard's name on one side. For the first few years, Richard was my world. I breastfed him until he was 2 years old. I taught him to walk, to talk, to laugh. He was a happy child, mischievous, always running around the ranch, chasing chickens, hiding among the trees that Albert and I had planted. The ranch grew with him. Albert got better jobs. He saved every dollar he could. We bought more land, 2 more acres, then 2 more. We built a bigger house, made of concrete block, with a cement roof, with electricity, with running water. I planted a garden, flowers my mother had given me, rose bushes, jasmines, bougainvillea that climbed the walls and filled the air with colour. We bought more animals, cows, horses, goats. The ranch became a place full of life, full of noise, of movement, of purpose. Richard grew up there, among the animals, among the earth. He learned to ride a horse before he turned 6. He learned to milk the cows, to collect eggs, to plant seeds. He was a good boy, obedient, affectionate. He always hugged me before going to sleep. He always told me he loved me. When he turned 10, Albert decided it was time to send him to a better school, one in the city, more expensive, but with better teachers, better opportunities. "Our son is not going to be a construction worker like me," Albert said. "He's going to study. He's going to be someone important." So we started making more sacrifices. Albert worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I sold the eggs, the milk, the cheeses I learned to make. All the money went toward Richard's education. And it worked. Richard was smart. He got good grades. The teachers congratulated him. They said he had a future, that he could go to college. I was so proud. Every night I waited for him to come back from school. I prepared his favorite meal. I listened to his stories about what he had learned that day. I watched him grow, turn into a young man, into a man. When he finished high school, he got a scholarship to study business administration at the Capital University. Albert and I cried with happiness the day he received the news. "You did it, son," Albert told him, hugging him. "We are so proud of you." Richard went to the city. We rented a small room for him. We sent him money every month, for food, for books, for everything he needed. During the first year, he called often, every week, sometimes twice a week. He told me about his classes, his friends, his plans. But later the calls began to space out. Once a month, then once every 2 months. He said he was busy, that he had many exams, many projects. In his 3rd year, he met Teresa. The first time he brought her to the ranch, I tried to be kind. I prepared her favorite food. I showed her the garden. I told her stories about when Richard was a child. She smiled, but it was a cold smile, polite, but empty. She looked at the house with disdain, the animals with disgust, the earth as if it was something dirty. "It's very rustic," she said that night during dinner. Albert and I looked at each other. We didn't say anything, but something in my chest tightened. After that visit, Richard started to change. He stopped talking about the ranch affectionately. He started saying it was the old farm. that it was in the middle of nowhere, that it was inconvenient to visit us. Teresa never came back. But Richard did, once in a while, on important dates, birthdays, Christmas. But he stayed for less time each time. Each time he seemed more anxious to leave. When he graduated, he got a job at a large company, in the capital. He started earning well, he moved into a better apartment, he bought a new car, and he married Teresa. We weren't invited to the wedding. Well, that's not exactly true. We were invited, but it was a last-minute invitation, over the phone, 2 weeks before. "It's a small ceremony, Mum," Richard said. "Very intimate, just close family." When we arrived, we saw that there were more than 100 people, elegant people, wearing expensive clothes with brilliant jewelry. We looked out of place in our simple clothes. Teresa greeted us coldly. Her family didn't even speak to us. For the entire party, we stayed in a corner, alone, like unwanted guests at our own son's wedding. Albert didn't say anything that night, but on the way back to the ranch, I saw him wiping his eyes. He was crying. My strong husband, my rock. He was crying. "We lost our son," he said in a broken voice. I took his hand. "Don't say that. He's just adjusting to his new life." But deep down, I knew he was right. After the wedding, the visits became even more infrequent, once or twice a year, always quick, always in a hurry. Albert began to get sick 2 years later. At first they were small pains, in his chest, in his arm. He ignored them for months. He said it was fatigue, that it was old age. But one night he woke up unable to breathe. I rushed him to the hospital. The doctors said he had had a minor heart attack, that he needed care, rest, expensive medication. I called Richard. I explained the situation. I told him his father was seriously ill. "I'm coming right over," he said. But he didn't go. He sent $500 and an apology. He said he had an important meeting at work, that he couldn't miss it. Albert spent 2 weeks in the hospital. I stayed with him every night, in an uncomfortable chair next to his bed, holding his hand, praying. When he left the hospital, the doctors told him he couldn't work anymore, that his heart was weak, that he needed to rest. That destroyed him. Albert was a man of work, of action. He didn't know how to sit still, not to stay quiet. He tried to continue working on the ranch, but he couldn't anymore. He got tired quickly. He was short of breath. I took the reins of everything. I took care of the animals, planted, harvested, sold. And I took care of Albert. I gave him his medicine. I prepared his food. I made sure he rested. They were difficult months. But we were together, and that was the only thing that mattered. Richard came to visit us once during that time. He stayed for 2 hours. He talked on the phone half the time. He barely looked at his father. Albert didn't say anything. But that night, after Richard left, I found him sitting on the porch, looking at the stars, with tears rolling down his cheeks. I sat down beside him. I didn't say anything. I just took his hand. "We did everything we could," he finally said. "We gave him everything." "I know," I whispered. "Where did we go wrong, Elvira?" I didn't have an answer to that question. Albert died 6 months later, in his sleep, peacefully. I was lying next to him. I woke up in the early morning and knew immediately that he was gone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just held him. One last time. I felt his body grow cold in my arms, and I whispered everything I hadn't been able to tell him while he was alive. I called Richard at 6 o'clock in the morning. Your father died, I said. There was a long silence. When? This morning. Another silence. All right. I'm coming right over. He arrived 2 days later, with Teresa, both dressed in black, with serious but empty expressions. The funeral was small, some neighbours, some friends of Albert's. James came from the United States. It was he who held me during the burial, not Richard. After the funeral, Richard stayed one more night. That night was when everything started to change. Richard and Teresa arrived at the ranch 3 days after Albert's funeral. I was in the kitchen, washing the breakfast dishes, my hands submerged in the warm water, looking out the window at the garden that Albert and I had planted together. The rose bushes were in bloom. The bougainvillea climbed the walls. Everything was still alive. Everything was still growing. Except him. I heard the car stop in front of the house. The sound of the doors closing, footsteps approaching. I dried my hands on my apron and went out to greet them. Richard was wearing a dark suit. Teresa wore a tight black dress, high heels that sank into the dirt path. She looked at the ground with disgust, as if afraid of getting dirty. "Hi, Mum," Richard said. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Cold, distant. Teresa just nodded her head. She didn't even look me in the eye. "Come in," I said. I made coffee. We went inside the house. They sat at the dining room table, that big wooden table that Albert had built with his own hands, where we had eaten together for so many years, where we had celebrated birthdays, Christmases, where we had been a family. I served the coffee. Teresa tasted it and wrinkled her nose. She didn't say anything, but I saw her expression. She didn't like it. Richard took a sip. He put the cup down on the table. He looked at me seriously. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. Something in my stomach tightened. "About what?" "About the ranch. About your situation. About what you're going to do now that Dad is gone." I sat down across from them, my hands in my lap. "I'm going to stay here. This is my house." Teresa let out a brief, dry laugh. "Alone? At your age?" I looked at her. "I'm 64 years old. I'm not a disabled old woman." "It's not that," Richard said quickly. "But this ranch is a lot of work. The animals, the land, everything needs constant attention. How are you going to manage it by yourself?" "I've been managing it for the last few months," I said. "While your father was sick. I took care of everything." "And you look exhausted," Teresa said, leaning forward. "Look at your hands. Look at your face. You're killing yourself here." I looked at my hands. They were rough, calloused, stained by the sun, working hands, hands that had built this life. "I'm fine," I said. Richard sighed. He pulled some papers out of a folder he had brought. He placed them on the table. He spread them out in front of me. "Mum, listen. Teresa and I have been thinking. We spoke with Charles, my father-in-law. He just retired from his job. He's looking for a quiet place to live, a project, something to keep him busy." I didn't like where this conversation was going. "And?" "We offered him the ranch," Teresa said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The silence that followed was absolute. "What?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Don't get upset," Richard said. "Let me explain. Charles is a hard-working man. He knows about animals, about farming. He has experience, and he has money saved. He can invest in improving the property, make it more productive." "This is my house," I said. My hands were beginning to tremble. And no one is saying it isn't, Richard said. But be realistic. Mum, you can't handle this by yourself. And the ranch is going to go to waste if there isn't someone working it properly. I've worked it for 30 years, I said, raising my voice. With Dad, Teresa said. But he's gone now. And you don't have the strength or the capacity to do everything that's needed. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I held firm. This ranch is mine. Your father left it to me. To me. Not to you. Not to your father-in-law. Richard stood up too. He picked up the papers and held them out to me. That's why we need you to sign this. What is it? I asked without taking the documents. It's a property transfer. Temporary. You give Charles the management. He takes care of everything. He invests in improvements, and you receive a portion of the profits every month. It's a benefit for everyone. No, I said. Simple. Direct. Teresa stood up. Don't be stubborn, Elvira. This is what's best for you. You can't stay here alone. What if you get sick? What if you fall? What if you have an emergency? There's no one to help you. I have neighbours, I said. Neighbours who are miles away, Richard said. Mum, be reasonable. Sign the papers, give the property to Charles, and move to the city. We can find a small apartment for you, near hospitals, near everything. I don't want an apartment, I said. My voice broke. I want my house, my ranch, my life. Your life ended when Dad died, Teresa said. And those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Richard gave her a warning look, but he didn't contradict her. You can't stay here forever, Richard said, softer. It's dangerous. It's irresponsible. As your son, it's my duty to take care of you. And taking care of you means getting you out of here. Taking care of me would be respecting what I want, I said with tears in my eyes. What you want isn't always what you need, Teresa said. Richard placed the papers on the table. He took out a pen. He placed it next to them. Sign, Mum, he said. Please, make it easy for everyone. I looked at them. My son, the woman who had changed him, and I saw something that broke my heart. I saw that they didn't care how I felt. They just wanted me to sign. They just wanted to get rid of the problem, the burden, of me. And if I don't sign, I asked. Richard sighed. Then we'll have to take other measures, legal ones. I can prove that you are not in a condition to take care of this property, that you are a danger to yourself. I can get a judge to declare that you need a guardian. Are you threatening me? I asked, incredulous. I'm protecting you, Richard said, even if you don't understand it now. Teresa approached me. She placed her hand on my shoulder, cold, calculating. Elvira, dear, she said in a sugary voice, no one wants to hurt you. We just want what's best for you. Sign, and everything will be easier. I looked at her, and in her eyes I saw the truth. This was not for my own good. This was for them, for their convenience, for their plans. But I was tired, so tired. Albert had just died. My heart was broken. My strength was depleted. I picked up the pen. My hands were shaking. Tears were rolling down my cheeks. But I signed. 1 signature, 2 signatures, 3 signatures, in all the places they indicated. Richard quickly took the papers. He put them in the folder. He smiled. You did the right thing, Mom, he said. But I knew I hadn't. I knew I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. They left that same afternoon. They didn't even stay for dinner. They were in a hurry. Things to do. Places to go. I was left alone in the empty house. I walked through the rooms. I touched the walls, the furniture. the memories. I went out to the garden. I sat on the bench where Albert and I used to sit in the afternoons. I looked at the flowers, the trees, the animals grazing in the distance, and I cried. I cried for Albert, for the life we had built, for the son we had raised who now treated me like a burden. I cried until I had no more tears left. 2 weeks later, Charles arrived. He arrived with a big truck, with workers, with plans. He greeted me cordially. He was an older man, about 65 years old, tall, strong, with grey hair. "Mrs. Elvira," he said, "I'm going to take good care of this place. Don't worry." I didn't answer. I just watched him as his men began to unload things, tools, materials, furniture. "Richard told me you'll be moving soon," Charles continued. "To the city. He already found an apartment for you." "When do I have to leave?" I asked. "In 2 weeks," he said. "I need to start the renovations." I nodded. I didn't have the strength to fight, to argue, to struggle. During those 2 weeks, I packed my life into boxes. Albert's clothes, his tools, his books, photographs of Richard when he was a child, when he still loved me, when we were still a family. I sold most of the furniture. They wouldn't fit in the small apartment Richard had rented for me. Charles was working outside, cutting down trees, moving fences, building new structures. Every change he made was like a stab. He was erasing everything Albert and I had built. He was making the ranch his own. On the last day, I took everything I could carry in the car Richard had sent to pick me up. A driver I didn't know, who didn't speak the whole trip. Before leaving, I walked across the property one last time. I touched the trees we had planted. I smelled the flowers in the garden. I went into the empty house and stood in the center of the living room. "Forgive me," I whispered. I don't know if I was saying it to Albert, to the ranch, or to myself. Then I left. I got into the car, and I drove away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I knew I would break down completely. The apartment in the city was exactly as I imagined. Small, dark, in an old building in a noisy area. One room, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom, a window that looked out onto an alley. The driver left the boxes on the floor. He gave me the keys, and left without saying a word. I was left alone in that strange space, looking at the grey walls, the cold cement floor, the low ceiling. I sat on the floor, among the boxes, and I wondered how I had ended up there, how I had gone from having a house, a ranch, a life, to having this. To nothing. The first few months were the hardest. I didn't know anyone. I had nowhere to go. I had no purpose. I got up late. No reason to get up early. No animals to feed. No land to work. I ate little. I barely went out. I spent my days sitting by the window, looking at the street, watching people pass by who had places to go, things to do. Richard called once a month. Short conversations, cold. "How are you, Mum?" "Fine." "Need anything?" "No, I'm fine. I'll call you later." And he hung up. Teresa never called, not even once. James called more often. From the United States, worried. "Elvira, are you eating well?" "Yes." "Are you going out? Do you know the neighbors?" "Not really." "I'm worried about you, sis." "I'm fine, James. Don't worry." But I wasn't fine, and he knew it. One day, 6 months after I moved, I received a letter. It was from the bank, notifying me about changes in the property deed. I opened it with trembling hands, and there it was, black and white, and the ranch was no longer mine. It was no longer in my name. It was now in the name of Charles Ortiz. It wasn't a temporary transfer, as Richard had said. It was permanent, definitive. I had been robbed. My own son had robbed me. I sat on the floor with the letter in my hands, and something inside me woke up, something that had been asleep, numbed by pain, by fatigue, by resignation, rage. I went to the box where I had kept all the important documents. I pulled it out from under the bed. I opened it. They were all there. All the papers. Albert's will. The original titles. The deeds. The documents I had signed that day. I checked them one by one, reading every word, every line, looking for something. Anything. And then I saw it. An incorrect date. A signature that didn't match. A small detail, but important. I picked up the phone. I called James. "Brother," I said when he answered, "I need you to come. I need your help. I think I found something." James arrived 2 weeks later. I saw him get out of a taxi in front of the building, tall, well-dressed, with a leather briefcase in his hand. He was wearing dark glasses and a grey suit that gave him an air of authority, of someone important, of someone who knew what he was doing. He walked up the stairs to my apartment. The elevator had been out of order for months. No one repaired it. No one complained. Everyone simply accepted it. When he reached the 3rd floor, he was barely out of breath. He knocked on the door. I opened it quickly. "Elvira," he said. His voice sounded tired, worried. "What have they done to you?" I didn't answer. I just let him in. He looked around. I saw his eyes scan the small apartment, the cheap furniture, the stained walls, the dirty window that barely let in any light. He didn't say anything, but I saw his expression. Pain, contained rage. He sat down at the plastic table. He put his briefcase on it. He looked at me intently. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning, And then I spoke. I told him about Richard's visit after the funeral, about how they pressured me, about Teresa and her cold words, about the papers they made me sign, about the promises they made me, promises that it would be temporary, that I would receive money every month, that it would still be mine. I told him about Charles arriving with his workers, about how they changed everything, about how they took me out of my house, of my life. I told him about the apartment, about the loneliness, about Richard's brief calls, about the letter from the bank. James listened to everything in silence, his jaw clenched, his hands closed into fists on the table. When I finished, he waited a few seconds before speaking. "Where are the documents?" he finally asked. I got up. I went to the bedroom. I pulled the metal box out from under the bed. I brought it to the table. I opened it in front of him. James took out the papers one by one. He spread them out on the table. He took his reading glasses out of his jacket pocket. He put them on and began to read. Minutes passed, long minutes of silence. All that could be heard was the sound of the pages turning, the noise from the street outside, my laboured breathing. James read slowly, carefully, stopping at certain parts, going back, comparing documents. Finally, he looked up. "Elvira," he said, "this is wrong, very wrong. There are serious irregularities here." I felt my heart race. "What did you find?" James picked up one of the documents. He placed it in front of me. He pointed with his finger. "Look at this date," he said. "It says you signed this on March 15th, but Albert died on March 20th. I looked at him, confused. "No, Albert Elliot died on March 10th, not the 20th. James nodded. Exactly. But here it says you signed these documents 5 days before he died, which is impossible because these papers talk about the transfer of an inherited property. You can't transfer something you haven't inherited yet. Does that mean the signature isn't valid? I asked. It means someone manipulated the dates, James said. And that is fraud. He picked up another document. Albert's will. Here is your husband's original will, he said. Certified. Signed before a notary. It clearly states that the ranch and all properties pass to you, with lifelong usufruct. Do you know what that means? I shook my head. It means Richard couldn't transfer the property without your real and verified consent. And even though you signed documents, these have to be validated by a judge when lifelong usufruct is involved, especially when dealing with a recent widow. But I signed, I said. I was conscious. I knew what I was doing. Were you conscious? James asked, staring at me. Or were you grieving? Had your husband just died? Were you pressured? Were you threatened? I lowered my gaze. They said that if I didn't sign, they would try to declare that I was not fit to care for the property, that they would take the ranch away from me anyway, that it would be worse for me. That's called coercion, James said. His voice hardened. And coercion invalidates a contract, especially when the person is in a state of vulnerability. He took a notebook out of his briefcase. He started taking notes, writing quickly, marking important points. I need you to answer a few questions for me, he said without stopping writing. Were you present when they registered the transfer? No, I said. Richard told me he would take care of all the paperwork, that I didn't have to worry about anything. Did they give you copies of the registered documents? They gave me some papers, but not all of them. He said the rest would arrive by mail. They never arrived. Did they clearly explain that you were permanently transferring the property? No. They said it was temporary, that Charles would only manage the ranch, that I would remain the legal owner. James stopped writing. He looked at me. Elvira, this was not a legal transfer. This was dispossession, planned, executed, and probably with the complicity of someone else. Someone else? I asked. The notary who certified these documents, he said, pointing to a signature on one of the papers. Either he is an accomplice or he was deceived too. I need to investigate. He stood up. He walked to the window. He stood looking at the street for a moment, thinking. This is going to be complicated, he finally said. But it's not impossible. We have elements. We have evidence of irregularities. We have the original will. We have inconsistencies in the dates. So I can get the ranch back? I asked. My voice was trembling. James turned to me. We can try, but I need you to understand something. It's going to be a long legal battle. It's going to be costly, and it's going to be painful, because we are going to have to face Richard directly. It's going to be public. It's going to be ugly. I don't care, I said, and the firmness in my voice surprised me. I don't care anymore. They took everything from me. My house, my life, my dignity. I have nothing left to lose. James smiled, a small but genuine smile. There's the Elvira I know, the one who doesn't give up. He returned to the table. He took out his phone. He dialed a number. Hello, Cecilia, he said when someone answered. This is James Perez. I need you to do me an urgent favor. I need to investigate a notary. I also need certified copies of property records. Yes, I'll send you the details by email. Thanks. He hung up. He dialed another number. Albert, he said. Not my husband, Albert. Another Albert. I need to hire a private investigator. Someone discreet. Someone good. Do you know anyone? Perfect. Give me their number. He spent the next hour making calls, taking notes, organizing. I watched him, and for the first time in months, I felt something akin to hope. Small, fragile, but it was there. When he finished, he put away his phone. He looked at me. "We are going to do this right," he said. "We're going to be smart, discreet. We're not going to notify Richard about what we're doing. Not yet. First, we're going to gather all the information we can, all the evidence, all the mistakes they made." "How long is that going to take?" I asked. "A few weeks, maybe a month. But in the meantime, you have to act normal. If Richard calls, talk to him like always. Don't give him any signal that something is happening. Can you do that?" I nodded. "I can." "Good. Now tell me, have you seen Richard since you moved here?" "No. He just calls sometimes. Short conversations. He asks if I'm okay, if I need anything. But he never comes." "And Teresa?" "She has never called. Not once." James pursed his lips. "Of course not. She got what she wanted. And Charles? Have you heard anything from him?" "Nothing. I don't know what he's doing with the ranch. I don't know if he's taking good care of the animals. I don't know anything." "We're going to find out," James said. "I hired an investigator. He's going to go to the ranch. He's going to take pictures. He's going to talk to the neighbors. He's going to document everything Charles is doing with the property." "And what good is that?" I asked. "If Charles is modifying the property significantly without permits, if he's selling animals that should technically still be yours, if he is profiting from something he obtained fraudulently, all of that helps us. Everything adds up." I got up. I went to the kitchen. I made coffee. Simple coffee in an old coffee maker. Nothing like the coffee I used to make on the ranch with the coffee maker Albert gave me for our 10th anniversary. I poured 2 cups. I gave one to James. "I'm scared," I admitted in a low voice. "It's normal," James said. "But you're not alone. Not this time. I'm going to stay here as long as necessary. I'll be with you every step of the way. And we're going to get back what's yours." "What if it doesn't work?" I asked. "What if a judge says everything was legal?" "Then we'll fight harder," James said. "We'll appeal. We'll look for other angles. But we're not going to give up. Did you hear me? We're not going to give up." I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, bitter, but comforting. "James," I said, "why are you doing this? You live in another country. You have your life, your job. Why come back for me?" James put his cup down on the table. He took my hand. "Because you're my sister," he said. "Because when I was a kid and Dad left us, you worked so I could go to school. You sacrificed so I could study, so I could have opportunities. Everything I am, everything I have. I owe it to you." His voice broke. I saw his eyes fill with tears. "And now you need me," he continued. "And I'm not going to fail you. Not like Richard failed you. Not like everyone failed you." He hugged me, and I cried. I cried on his shoulder like a child. I cried out everything I had kept inside for months. All the pain, all the sadness, all the rage. When I calmed down, I pulled away. I wiped my tears. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Now we wait," James said. "We wait for the investigator to do his job. We wait for my contact at the property registry to get the documents. And in the meantime, we start preparing the case." "Are we going to sue?" I asked. "Eventually, yes. But first, We'll try mediation. We'll confront Richard with the evidence. We'll give him the opportunity to do the right thing, to return what isn't his. He won't do it, I said. I know him. He's married to Teresa. She'll never let him give anything back. You're probably right, James said. But we have to try, for legal protocol. And because if we go to court, the judge will want to see that we tried to resolve this civilly first. I nodded. We spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing documents. James took pictures of everything. He uploaded it to a digital cloud. He made copies. We never know what might happen, he explained. It's better to have everything backed up in multiple places. When it started to get dark, James stood up. I'm going to look for a nearby hotel, he said. I'll be back early tomorrow. We're going to start working seriously. You can stay here, I offered. The sofa isn't comfortable, but it works. James looked at the small, worn sofa. He smiled. It's fine. I've slept in worse places. That night, I prepared a simple dinner. Rice, beans, chicken. Nothing special. Nothing like the dinners I used to prepare at the ranch. We ate in silence. But it was a comfortable silence, of family, of siblings who understand each other without needing words. Afterward, I washed the dishes. James prepared the sofa. He took off his jacket. He loosened his tie. He looked tired but determined. Elvira, he said before lying down, I want you to know something. Whatever happens, win. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange state of tension and hope. James worked from the apartment, his laptop always open on the plastic table, papers scattered everywhere, his phone ringing constantly. I tried to keep my routine normal. I went out to buy food. I cleaned. I cooked. But all the time my mind was elsewhere, on the ranch, on what we were about to do. The investigator James hired was named Elias Flores. He was a man in his 50s, thin, with shrewd eyes. He spoke little, but when he did, every word counted. He came to the apartment one afternoon. He brought a folder full of photographs. He spread them out on the table. I went closer to look, and what I saw took my breath away. The ranch had completely changed. The trees that Albert and I had planted had been cut down, uprooted. In their place were new structures, metal sheds, huge corrals. The garden was gone. The flowers had been pulled up, the earth flattened. Everything turned into a gravel parking lot. The house. Our house. It was painted a different color. The windows changed. The porch where Albert and I used to sit in the afternoons had been demolished. I can't believe it, I whispered. The tears started falling before I could stop them. Elias pointed to one of the photos. This is the most important thing, he said. Look here. It was a photo of a sign, new, shiny. It read, Charles Ortiz Farm, Livestock Production and Sales. He's running a business on the property, James said. He's not just using it. He's exploiting it commercially. And all the profits are going into his pocket. That's illegal, I asked, wiping my tears. It depends, James said. But it definitely wasn't part of the agreement they presented to you. They told you he was only going to take care of the ranch, not that he was going to turn it into a business. Elias pulled out more photos. I also spoke with some neighbors. They say Charles has been selling animals, wood from the trees he cut down. He's even renting part of the land to other farmers. He's profiting from everything, I said. My voice was trembling with rage. And there's more, Elias said. He pulled out another group of photos. Look at this. They were photos of Teresa, visiting the ranch, walking around the property with a woman I didn't recognize, both taking notes, measuring. What are they doing? I asked. From what I could find out from the neighbors, Elias said, they're planning to subdivide the land, sell parcels. There are rumors that they already have interested buyers. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. They're going to sell the ranch in pieces. Or at least that's what they're planning, James said. His jaw was clenched, his knuckles white. But they won't be able to, not if we act fast. He stood up. He started pacing back and forth, thinking. We need to speed this up, he said. If they start selling parcels, everything gets complicated. We need to stop them before that. How? I asked. We're going to ask for a court order, James said. A temporary restraining order to freeze any transaction related to the property until the case is resolved. And will a judge give us one? I asked. With this evidence, yes, James said, picking up the photos. We have irregularities in the documents. We have evidence of unauthorized commercial exploitation. We have significant changes to the property without your consent. It's enough for a judge to order a temporary suspension. Elias stood up. There's something else you should know, he said. Richard has been visiting the ranch regularly, more than you thought. Apparently, he's very involved in the whole business. Of course he is, I said bitterly. This was his plan from the beginning, which helps us, James said, because it shows that it wasn't just an innocent transfer to help you. It was a premeditated plan to take the property and profit from it. He paid Elias. He thanked him for his work. The investigator left, leaving us with the photos and documents. That night, James prepared all the documentation to present to a judge. He wrote the request for the temporary restraining order. He attached all the evidence, the photos, the documents with irregularities, Albert's will. We are going to file this tomorrow, he said, and then we are going to confront Richard. We're going to talk to him, I asked, surprised. Yes, James said, but not before we have the court order. First, we ensure they can't sell anything. Then we talk. We give them an opportunity to do the right thing, to voluntarily return the property. They won't do it, I repeated. Probably not, James admitted. But we have to try. And when they refuse, then we go with everything. Full lawsuit, public trial, everything. I went to bed that night with a knot in my stomach. Tomorrow, everything would really begin. The legal battle, the confrontation with my son. I barely slept. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Albert, wondering what he would say if he could see all of this, if he would be proud that I was fighting, or disappointed that it had come to this. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I made coffee. James was already awake, sitting on the sofa, reviewing the documents one last time. Ready? He asked when he saw I was up. I wasn't ready. I was terrified, but I nodded anyway. Ready. We got dressed. I put on my best dress. Black. Simple. The same one I had worn to Albert's funeral. James put on his suit. He looked imposing, professional, like someone who couldn't be ignored. At 9 o'clock in the morning, we were at the courthouse. It was a large building, cold, with long hallways and numbered doors, people coming and going, lawyers with briefcases, families waiting. James filed the request. The clerk reviewed it. She said the judge would see it that same afternoon. We waited. Hours, sitting on uncomfortable benches, without talking much, just waiting. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they called us. We entered an office. The judge was an older woman, about 65 years old, with grey hair pulled back in a bun, glasses perched on the tip of her nose. She read our request. She reviewed the documents, the photos, the will. She didn't say anything for several minutes. She just read. Her expression impassive. Finally, she looked up. She looked at James and me. "This is serious," she said. Her voice was firm, clear. "If everything you present here is true, we are talking about possible fraud." "It is true, Your Honor," James said. "And we need to protect the property before it's too late." The judge nodded. She picked up a stamp. She stamped it on the document. "Granted," she said. "Temporary restraining order approved. Any transaction related to the property in question is frozen until further order of this court. Notify the involved parties." I felt as if I could breathe for the first time in months. We left the courthouse with the order in hand. James was smiling. I was too. It was small, but it was a step, the first of many. "Now," James said, "we're going to see Richard." And then I knew the hardest part was just beginning. James called Richard that same afternoon. I was sitting next to him, listening. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. "Richard," James said when my son answered. His voice was calm, professional. "This is your Uncle James. I need us to meet. It's important." There was a pause. I heard Richard's voice on the other end, confused, irritated. "Meet? For what?" "It's about the ranch," James said. "And about your mother. We need to talk, the three of us." Another, longer pause. "I don't have time for this," Richard said. "I'm busy. If Mom needs something, she can call me." "It's not something that can be resolved over the phone," James said. His tone hardened slightly. "And it's not a suggestion. It's necessary. Tomorrow. At 10 o'clock in the morning. At the downtown coffee shop. The one across from the park." "Are you summoning me?" Richard let out a nervous laugh. "I'm being courteous," James said. "I could simply proceed legally without notifying you, but I'm giving you the opportunity to resolve this civilly." The silence on the other end was long, tense. "All right," Richard finally said. "I'll be there." He hung up. James put the phone down on the table. He looked at me. "He's coming," he said. "Probably with Teresa. And probably with a lawyer if he's smart." "And what are we going to do?" I asked. My voice was trembling. "We're going to present the evidence," James said. "We're going to show him that we know everything. And we're going to offer him a deal. Return the property voluntarily. And we won't file criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" I asked, surprised. "Fraud, coercion, falsification of documents," James said. "All of that is punishable. He could go to jail. Charles too. And they definitely don't want that." I couldn't eat that night. My stomach was tight. My nerves were eating me up inside. I went to bed early but didn't sleep. I stayed awake, staring into the darkness, thinking about the child I had raised, about the man he had become, wondering where I had lost my son. I was up by 8 o'clock in the morning. I showered. I dressed carefully. I chose a simple dress, grey. My hair pulled back. I wanted to look dignified, strong. James put on his best suit, black, a red tie. He carried the briefcase with all the documents, all the evidence. We arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. We sat at a back table. James ordered 2 coffees. I didn't touch mine. I just looked at it. The steam rising, disappearing. At 10 o'clock sharp, Richard walked in. He came with Teresa, just as James had predicted. She wore a fitted dress, high heels, perfect makeup. He was wearing a dark suit. He looked tense, nervous. They saw us. They walked toward our table. They sat down across from us. Richard looked at me for just a second. Then he looked away. Teresa didn't even look at me. She kept her eyes on James. "This better be important," Richard said. "I cancelled a meeting to be here." "It is important," James said. He opened his briefcase. He pulled out a folder. He placed it on the table. It's about the fraud you committed against your mother. Teresa tensed up. Richard blinked. Fraud? What are you talking about? James opened the folder. He pulled out the first document. He placed it in front of Richard. This is the document you made your mother sign, he said. Look at the date. It says March 15th, but your father died on March 10th. This document talks about transferring an inherited property. How could your mother transfer something she hadn't inherited yet? Richard picked up the document. He read it. The colour began to drain from his face. It's just an administrative error, he said. It's not an error, James said. It's a falsification. Someone changed the dates to make it look legal. He pulled out another document. And this is your father's original will. It clearly states that the property passed to your mother with lifelong usufruct. Do you know what that means? Richard didn't answer. It means you couldn't transfer that property without a court order, James continued. It means everything you did is void, invalid. Teresa leaned forward. She signed voluntarily. There are witnesses. She signed under coercion, James said, staring at her. She had just been widowed. She was vulnerable. You threatened to take the property away from her anyway if she didn't sign. That invalidates the consent. He pulled out the photos. He spread them out on the table. The photos of the destroyed ranch, of the commercial sign, of Teresa measuring the land. And this, James said, this shows that Charles is not just taking care of the property. He's exploiting it commercially. He's profiting. And you are planning to subdivide it and sell it. Richard looked at the photos. His mouth was open, wordless. You spied on us, Teresa asked. Her voice trembled with rage. We investigated, James corrected, as we should have done from the beginning. He leaned back in his chair. He crossed his arms. Here's the situation, he said. I have enough evidence to sue you for fraud, for coercion, for falsification of documents. I can make this very public, very ugly, and very costly for you. But, he continued, I'm willing to give you an opportunity. Just one. Return the property, sign the necessary documents, and this ends here. No lawsuit, no charges. It's over. The silence that followed was heavy. Richard looked at the table. His hands were shaking. Teresa looked at James with pure hatred in her eyes. What if we say no? Teresa asked. Then I'll see you in court, James said, and I promise you won't win. You'll lose the property anyway, but you'll also lose money, reputation, and possibly your freedom. Richard finally looked at me, for the first time since he had arrived, and in his eyes, I saw something. Guilt? Fear? I wasn't sure. Mum, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I just wanted... What? I asked. The tears started to fall. You just wanted what? To rob me? To leave me on the street? To forget everything your father and I did for you? He flinched, as if my words had hit him physically. Teresa took his hand. We're not giving them anything, she said firmly. The property is legal. Everything is in order. James smiled, but it was a cold smile. We'll see, he said. He put the documents back into the folder. You have until noon tomorrow to decide. After that, I file the formal lawsuit. He stood up. I did too. We left the coffee shop without looking back. Outside, I took a deep breath. The fresh air filled my lungs. Do you think they'll do it? I asked. Do you think they'll return the ranch? James shook his head. No, Teresa won't allow it. But I had to give them the opportunity. And now what? Now, James said, we prepare for war. We didn't have to wait until noon the next day. At 8 o'clock that same evening, someone knocked on the apartment door. James and I were reviewing documents, preparing the formal lawsuit. When we heard the knocks, we looked at each other. Are you expecting someone? James asked. I shook my head. James stood up. He walked to the door. He opened it just a crack. It was Richard, alone, without Teresa. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair messy, his eyes red. I need to talk to you, he said. His voice sounded broken. James opened the door completely. Richard walked in. He looked different, smaller, more vulnerable. He stood in the middle of the living room, looking around, seeing the place where his mother lived, the miserable apartment, the cheap furniture, the poverty he had caused. Sit down, James said, pointing to a chair. Richard sat down. He placed his hands on the table. They were trembling. I remained standing. I didn't know if I could sit near him. I didn't know if I wanted to be in the same room. Teresa doesn't know I'm here, he finally said. She told me not to come, not to give you the satisfaction of seeing us beg. And why did you come? James asked. Richard looked at me. For the first time in months, he really looked at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Because you were right, he said. His voice broke. Everything you said this morning, every word. It was true. He ran his hands over his face. He took a deep breath. I shouldn't have done it, he continued. I shouldn't have let Teresa convince me. I shouldn't have signed those papers. I shouldn't have taken the ranch from you. The words came out rushed, desperate. But she said it was for the best, that you couldn't take care of the property alone, that you were going to hurt yourself, that Charles needed it. And I believed her, or I wanted to believe her. You wanted to believe her? I said. My voice came out harsher than I expected. Or was it simply convenient for you? Richard lowered his gaze. Both. God forgive me. Both. He stood up. He started pacing back and forth, like a caged animal. Charles offered us money, he said, for the property. $50,000. Teresa said we could use it to buy a bigger apartment, to pay off debts. And I accepted. I felt as if I had been punched. You sold my house for $50,000? The ranch is worth 10 times that, James said, his voice full of contempt. Probably more. I know, Richard said. Richard Shaw. I know now. Charles fooled us, and we fooled you. The whole thing was a disaster. He turned toward me. He moved closer. He fell to his knees in front of me. Mom, he said. Tears streamed down his face. Forgive me. Please. Forgive me for everything. For being so stupid. For being so selfish. For forgetting everything you and Dad did for me. I looked at him. My son, on his knees, crying, begging for forgiveness. Part of me wanted to hug him, to tell him everything was all right, that I forgave him, because that's what mothers did, right? But another part of me, the part that had suffered for months, the part that had cried alone in this horrible apartment, the part that had lost everything, that part couldn't forgive so easily. Get up, I said, my voice cold, distant. Richard got up slowly. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. Did you come to return the ranch? James asked. Richard nodded. Yes, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. I'll talk to Charles. I'll give him back the money. I don't know how, but I will. And Teresa, I asked, is she on board? Richard shook his head. No, she's furious. She says I'm crazy, that you don't have a case, that we should fight. Then you have nothing to offer, James said, because the property is in Charles's name, not yours, and if he doesn't sign, there's nothing to be done. He'll sign, Richard said with determination. I'll tell him the truth, that everything was illegal, that if he doesn't return the property, he'll go to jail. He won't want to risk that. James studied him for a moment. Then he nodded. All right. You have 1 week. 1 week to get Charles to sign the retransfer documents. If you don't, we proceed with the full lawsuit. I'll do it, Richard said. I promise you. He turned to me. Mum, I know you don't believe me. I know I've broken your trust. But I'm going to fix this. I swear it. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He waited a few seconds, waiting for me to say something, to give him some sign of forgiveness. But I didn't. Finally, he lowered his head. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. I love you, he said without turning around. You and Dad. I always loved you, even if it doesn't look like it. And he left. The door closed behind him. Silence filled the apartment. James came closer. He put his hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what I feel. It's normal, James said. He's your son. It's complicated. I sat down on the sofa. My legs couldn't hold me up anymore. Do you think he'll do it? I asked. Do you really think he'll return the ranch? James sat down beside me. I think he'll try. But Charles isn't going to let go of the property easily. He's invested money. He's made changes. He won't want to lose all that. Then we go to court, I said. Probably, James admitted. But at least Richard is on our side now. Or so it seems. That helps us. That night I went to bed with a million thoughts in my head. Was Richard really sorry? Or was he just afraid of the legal consequences? Did the difference matter? Could I ever forgive him for what he had done? I didn't have answers, just questions. So many questions. The next few days were filled with anxious waiting. James continued preparing the lawsuit, just in case. I tried to keep myself busy, cleaning, cooking, trying not to think. Richard called twice, saying he was working on convincing Charles that he needed a little more time. Teresa didn't call, but according to Richard, she was furious, threatening to leave him if he returned the property. On the 6th day, Richard showed up at the apartment again. This time he had documents in his hand, and an expression I couldn't quite read. I did it, he said. His voice trembled. Charles signed. James took the documents. He checked them carefully, page by page. Finally, he looked up and smiled. They're in order, he said. The property is back in your name, Elvira. I felt as if the world had stopped. After so much time, so much suffering, so much struggle. The ranch was mine again. But looking at my son, seeing his face full of guilt and pain, I didn't feel victory, I only felt sadness. Because although I had recovered my property, I had lost something more important. I had lost my innocence, my trust, the family I thought I had, and that couldn't be recovered with any document. A week later, James and I went to the property registry. We carried all the documents, the ones signed by Charles, the ones certified by the notary. Everything in order, everything legal this time. The official who assisted us reviewed every paper carefully. She compared signatures, verified dates, wrote on her computer. Everything is correct, she finally said. The property is registered again in the name of Mrs. Elvira Perez. She handed me a new document, with an official seal, with my name printed in black letters. I took it with trembling hands. I looked at it, and I felt something break inside me. Tears began to fall uncontrollably. James hugged me. "We did it," he whispered. "We did it, sister." We left the building. The sun was shining brightly. It was hot, but I felt cold inside. "When do you want to go see the ranch?" James asked. "Tomorrow," I said. "I want to go tomorrow." That night I packed a small suitcase, clothes, some personal things. I didn't know how long I would stay. Maybe one day, maybe forever. Richard called that night. "Mum," he said, "I heard everything was registered. The ranch is yours again." "Yes," I said. I didn't know what else to say. "Are you going back to live there?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. There was a long, awkward silence. "Teresa left me," he finally said. His voice was broken. "She says I'm an idiot, that I ruined everything, that we lost a golden opportunity." Part of me wanted to console him, to tell him everything would be fine, but I couldn't. "I'm sorry," I said. And it was true. Despite everything, he was my son, and his pain hurt me. "Don't be sorry," he said. "I deserve it. I deserve all of it." He hung up before I could respond. The next morning, James rented a car. He drove for 2 hours until we reached the ranch. When we turned onto the familiar road, my heart started beating faster. And then I saw it. The ranch. My ranch. But it wasn't how I remembered it. The changes Charles had made were still there. The cut trees, the new sheds, the destroyed garden. James stopped the car in front of the house. We sat in silence, looking. "You can rebuild it," James said softly. "With time, you can make it yours again." We got out of the car. I walked slowly toward the house. My feet knew every stone on the path, every irregularity. The door was unlocked. Charles had left the key with the notary. He had left 2 days earlier, taking everything he had brought. I went inside. The walls were painted colors I didn't recognize. The floors had been changed. Everything looked different. But even so, it was my house. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, the door frames, remembering. Here was the kitchen where I prepared breakfast for Albert. Here was the dining room where we ate as a family. Here was the bedroom where we slept together, where we had dreamed our dreams. I went out to the backyard, where the garden used to be. Now, just hard dirt and gravel. I knelt down. I touched the earth with my hands, and I cried. I cried for Albert, for the lost years, for my son who had betrayed me, for the family that had broken. But I also cried with relief, because I was home. Finally, I was home. James came out and sat beside me. He didn't say anything. He was just there, as he had always been. "I'm going to stay," I said, wiping my tears. "I'm going to rebuild everything. It's going to take time, but I'll do it." "You're not alone," James said. "I'm going to help you. I'm going to stay for a while longer. And we're going to hire people. We're going to plant new trees. We're going to make a bigger garden. Better." "Thank you," I whispered. That afternoon we walked around the entire property, seeing the damage, making plans. Some neighbors approached when they saw us. They greeted me warmly. They said they were happy to see me back, that they had known what happened, that they had been worried. "This land missed you," said Mrs. Ivana, my nearest neighbor. It was noticeable. The animals weren't the same. The plants weren't growing right. I missed it too, I said. As night fell, James and I sat on the porch that Charles hadn't destroyed, looking at the stars, like Albert and I used to do. "What are you going to do about Richard?" James asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to forgive him. He's my son. But another part can't forget." "You don't have to decide now," James said. "Give it time. Give yourself time." I nodded. He was right. There was no rush. For the first time in a long time, I had all the time in the world, because I was home, and no one would take it away from me again. 6 months passed. 6 months since I recovered the ranch. 6 months of hard work, of reconstruction, of healing. James stayed for 2 full months. He helped me hire workers, to plant new trees, to rebuild the garden. We invested some of his savings in repairing the damage Charles had done. When he finally returned to the United States, the ranch was starting to look like itself again. Different. But mine. I hired 2 young men from the town, Elias and his brother Albert. Yes, his name was Albert, like my husband. Maybe it was a sign. They helped me with the animals, with the land, with the repairs that were still pending. I started cooking in my kitchen again, sleeping in my bedroom, walking barefoot in my garden every morning. Little by little, the ranch came back to life. I came back to life. Richard called every week. At first I didn't answer. Then I started answering, but the conversations were brief, cold. He never stopped trying. He never stopped asking for forgiveness. "Mum, I'm going to therapy. I'm working on being a better person." I listened, but I didn't say much. Until one day, 3 months after returning to the ranch, he showed up unannounced. He arrived in an old car, alone. He was wearing simple clothes. His hair was longer. He looked tired. But he also looked different. More humble. More real. He got out of the car and stood in front of the house, waiting, not daring to approach. I was in the garden, planting new rose bushes. I saw his car. I saw him get out. I saw him waiting. I put the shovel down on the ground. I wiped my hands on my apron, and I walked toward him. We stood looking at each other, mother and son, with so much between us, so much pain, so much history. "Hello, Mum," he finally said, his voice soft, fearful. "Hello, Richard," I replied. Can I come in?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment. Then I nodded. We went inside the house. I poured him coffee. We sat at the table, the same table where everything had started to break. "The ranch looks beautiful," he said, looking around. "It's getting back to how it was." "I'm working on it," I said. He took a sip of coffee. He breathed deeply. "Mum," he said, "I didn't come to apologize again. I know I've asked you 1,000 times. I came to tell you something different." I looked at him, waiting. "I came to tell you that I understood," he continued. "I understood what I lost. Not just the ranch. I lost you. I lost the opportunity to take care of you the way you took care of me. I lost years I'll never get back." His eyes filled with tears. "And I know that maybe you'll never forgive me. And that's okay. I deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the son I should have been from the start. I don't expect anything from you," he added. "I don't expect you to let me back into your life. I just wanted you to know." We were silent. The clock on the wall ticked the seconds. Outside, the birds chirped. The wind rustled in the trees. "Richard," I finally said, "I don't know if I'll ever be able to completely forgive you. What you did broke me in ways I didn't know it was possible to break." He nodded. Tears were streaming down his face. "But," I continued, "you are my son, and part of me will always love you, even if it hurts, even if it's complicated. I'm not asking you to go back to being the son you were," I said. "That child no longer exists. But if you truly want to change, if you truly want to rebuild something between us, it has to be slow, step by step." "Whatever," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Then start by coming once a month," I said. "We'll have lunch. We'll talk. No promises, no expectations. We'll just see what happens." He stood up. He walked toward me. He knelt in front of my chair. He took my hands. "Thank you, Mum," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a chance I don't deserve." I put my hand on his head, like when he was a child, when he got hurt and I comforted him. "Get up," I said softly. He stood up. We hugged. It was brief, still awkward, but it was a start. When he left that afternoon, I stood on the porch, watching his car disappear down the road. I didn't know if things would ever go back to how they were. Probably not. The damage was too deep. But maybe, just maybe, we could build something new, something different, something honest. I turned and looked at my ranch, the young trees growing, the flowers blooming, the animals grazing peacefully. I thought about Albert, about everything we had built together, about everything I had fought to keep. "I did it," I whispered to the wind. "I got our house back. I got my life back." I went into the house. My house. I made dinner. I ate alone. But I didn't feel lonely, because I was where I belonged. On the land I had worked, in the house I had built, in the life I had fought to recover. That night I sat on the porch, under the stars, with a cup of hot coffee in my hands, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. It wasn't the perfect life I had imagined. It wasn't the intact family I had dreamed of. But it was my life, on my terms, with my dignity intact. And that was enough. I looked up at the sky, at the stars that Albert and I used to count. "My name is no longer just Richard's mother," I said out loud. "My name is no longer Albert's widow. My name is Elvira Perez, and my story is just beginning." I smiled, because it was true. At my 64 years old, I had lost everything, and I had recovered it. I had been betrayed by my own son, and I had survived. I had hit rock bottom, and I had gotten back up. This was my second chance, my new beginning. And this time, no one was going to take it away from me. I finished my coffee. I went into the house. I locked the door. Tomorrow, I would plant more flowers. I would repair the fence on the west side. I would call James to tell him about Richard's visit. Tomorrow, I would continue rebuilding. But tonight, I was simply going to sleep in peace, in my bed, in my house, in my land. Finally home.